Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. Michael Ware is the owner of Controlled Chaos Arms in Iowa, where he builds precision rifles and custom firearm platforms for hunters, competitors, and everyday protectors. He's spent over 2 decades volunteering with the Iowa Firearms Coalition, serving as both chairman and now a board member, and he works on the national level with the NRA Grassroots Committee and the Clubs and Associations Committee. But Michael's influence goes far beyond the gun world. He writes for multiple firearms publications, runs his own Christian blog called Front Row Christian, and leads a local men's ministry and mission field through Cornerstone Bible Fellowship. He and his wife, his high school sweetheart, built their family through adoption, and he continues to disciple, counsel, and mentor believers in some of life's hardest issues. He's a craftsman, an advocate, and a theologian at heart, and a man who strives to live what he teaches. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. I'm really excited to talk with you. And the reason is because I was interviewed by you recently. And I have to say that interview was surprising to me. I didn't expect it to be as deep as it was. I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was, because I go on podcasts sometimes and you just never know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And I really genuinely had a fun time. And I really appreciate you having me on and having a great conversation. So I thought, we should continue the conversation on my platform, right? If you're up for it, because I want to learn more about you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for coming on IFC's Warrior Wednesday podcast. We had a good time. And I think that this is one of the things, I'm trying to think back now. I usually don't pick away at some of my buddies. Pete Brownell is what I'm thinking about right now. He lives right down the road and we're good friends. And we spoke a number of years ago. He's like, yeah, I think the podcast thing's about done. Maybe another year or two. And I thought at the time, I'm like, I don't know. I think that there's something there. And I didn't push back on him too hard. We were just sitting around over drinks, telling stories and whatnot, letting our hair down. Then I thought to myself, well, I kind of hope not. And then I thought on the way home, I'm like, it seems like these are conversations, Laura, where we're able to chase whatever rabbits we wish, metaphorical or otherwise, and really share. People have a tendency on this platform, especially, to be really genuine. We're not bound by rules that say over this half hour, we have to have 3 2-minute and 20-second breaks, and we have to fall into this cube, or we have to fall into this box. And so it gives us a great deal of freedom to talk about the things that are on our hearts, not just on our minds. And it doesn't always have to be totally subject oriented. So that gives you a lot of freedom to just be very genuine. And I think that's a basic draw to podcasts like the ones that you're offering here and the ones and many others that I have listened to or been part of or just interested in. So there's no reason we can't have these conversations the way that you and I did. And I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking all the different avenues we can go down. But I think I just want to start by getting to know you better first, because I realized when I was on your podcast, I hadn't done my research. And what I learned about you was, I don't know, I guess I could say I was surprised, but I was really intrigued. And so I know in your bio, you talked about the work you do with IFC, which is amazing, and 2 decades of work. But also personally, I'm interested in that as well, because you didn't just land here out of nowhere, right? And I'd like to know your backstory. I'd like to know your family situation. I know you have adopted kids. What did you learn through that process? How have the things that are in your backstory shaped who you are today?
Well, okay. So the beginning is I grew up in a little town in Southwest Iowa called Bedford. I think
I know that town.
Do you?
I used to work in Creston. Yeah.
Shut up. That's where my father-in-law lived forever. Very cool stuff. Yeah.
It's a small world.
It is, no doubt. So grew up there, I think it's the lowest populated county in Iowa and the second poorest. So it's in southwest Iowa, right along the Missouri border. Not a lot going on. 2 schools. There's one in Bedford and it's consolidated. And I think there's one left in Lenox now. But anyway, so pretty big county for not very many people and whatever else. And mom and dad have been very good to us kids. They did a good job. My dad was a career small businessman, pretty educated. My mom was a business teacher. They worked very hard. They were travelers. I mean, they traveled all over the world. It was very important to them. My dad went into the Peace Corps, raised his hand and did that after the Vietnam era and after he was in the service. And he got sent to Iran. And it's not like it is now. They package you up and they send you there. And they're like, we'll get a hold of you in 2 years. You know, so Iran was a pretty tough place to be, especially he was there during the change from with the Ayatollah and whatever else. And he told me, he's like, the country changed overnight. He said American sentiment was disliked immediately. And I can remember him telling me stories about my mom and my grandmother. My mom was his girlfriend at the time. My mom and my grandmother would send him letters. Mickey, send us a letter back. Let us know you're okay. Because what they did is they took their mail. So everything that they wrote was outgoing. They confiscated, opened it, read it, burned it, whatever else. But they would let them have the personal hell of getting all the incoming mail. So he was able to get word through other circles. Yes, I'm alive. It's okay. I'll make it back to America eventually. And he did. Wow. But I mean, very, very I shouldn't say understanding so much as learned in cultures beside ours. And I've always appreciated that because mom and dad have been good about taking us kids on travels and teaching us how to travel, letting us know there's more going on than just what we see on a daily basis. Because growing up in southwest Iowa in a lowly populated area, things tend to be a little homogenized. And I know that mom and dad didn't want us to think singularly. So granted, they're very Christian and there was no problem with our country or our culture, but it was important to them that I understand that this isn't the only thing going on in life and there's more. So that was a little about the upbringing. We were Presbyterians. Sorry for that. I try and joke about that when I can. And then you work hard on the weekends, you work hard in the evenings, and you play football and run track and do these things. And then it comes time to leave and go to college. So I did, and I moved up north of Des Moines. So it was 2.5 hours away or something like that. And during that period of time, I had met a girl that I was very fond of that was roughly half my size. And we became high school sweethearts. And so a year later, she moved up to Ames to go to Iowa State, or in that neighborhood rather. And we kept our relationship alive, of course. And one thing led to another, and we got more serious. And we said, well, let's get married, but let's wait until we have our careers in place. Because by our early 20s, we had already had friends that were married with children and divorced already. And we didn't want to risk that. So we got a little bit later start on that and made very good friends, lots of experiences along the way. I didn't have a great deal of focus on my faith at that time. Neither did she. So it was something that we did sparingly. And it came time to we got married, moved in together, tried to start a family, and that didn't work out. So God had other plans after all kinds of work. Yeah. And I don't remember, at one time we had tallied it up. It was like $56,000, I think, worth of IVF and AI and all these other things that we tried to have science help us in modern medicine. And we just couldn't get pregnant and stay pregnant. Lots of miscarriages, all kinds of things like that. And that was hard on us. It was exceedingly hard on my wife. But I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happened now. But at one point, we just kind of sat there on the couch and said, I don't know if we're meant to be parents or not, but we're not meant to have children the old-fashioned way. We're not meant to have children with the old-fashioned way with plenty of help. What is there left? And so she's like, well, she said, have you ever thought about adoption? And I said, I don't even know anybody, with one exception, who has been adopted. I don't know anything about it. And so we started learning about it. And I thought, you know what, this could work. So there's a long path for that with private adoption, usually. It's costly as well, but we did that with success twice. And it was kind of interesting after a couple years where, you read the story in Genesis of Cain and Abel. Cain's being a sourpuss, and God rolls up and says, why is your countenance fallen, my boy? That kind of thing. So I'm sitting there with my countenance down, and with a pretty glum, and we got a call saying there's a birth mom walk-in who's very far along. She's chose your profile. She wants to meet with you Monday. This is on a Friday. And we were pretty charged. I was pretty gassed and very nervous because this is something that we had gone through before. We didn't know much about it. And I couldn't rely on my normal supports, which had primarily been my folks and my brother and sister and some good friends, because nobody knew much about it. So, I left to go to work Monday very early. And I got a call at like 5 o'clock in the morning when I was on the way in and said, hey, birth mom's into labor. If you want to be placed with this adoption, you need to say yes, and you need to make it here now. So I called the wife. I said, get out of bed. I'm going to come back and pick you up. We need to make our way across the state to the hospital. And so we did that, got there, met, smiles, craziness, and we got to help birth the baby. So,
Wow.
yes, I was in charge of basically everything from the torso up, in charge of everything from the torso down. So I got to do cold, wet rags and ice chips, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Helped with other things. I got to cut the cord. We named the baby, that kind of stuff. When we going to spend the next 24 hours together in the hospital. And it was absolutely phenomenal. So being included on that, and the selflessness of a birth mom who says, I'm not able to do this for myself, and I want to give you my most prized possession with no strings attached. And so that was exceedingly humbling for me to think about it in that way. And our adoption agent, who happened to be our adoption attorney also, we spoke with her, and I'm like, how does one do this well? And she said, well, I have suffered 2 failed adoptions myself. I have biological kids. I have adopted children, and this is all you need to know. I said, okay, lay it on me. And I thought that she'd have this, Laura, this 5-point dissertation, you know what I mean? And she's like, all you've got to do is answer the question, is what I'm about to do or say honor the decision of the birth parents to whatever. She said, fill in the blank. And I'm like, that's it? And she's like, yeah, think about it. And I did. And it's the kind of thing that's ripped from scripture. I mean, if you want to equate it to something, and if you're biblically literate or you're not, it doesn't matter. Go to Matthew 5 and open that up, and then read the first 2 verses. And then you get to Matthew 5:3, which is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount and the first beatitude. You read that, and then you'll start to understand how this is going to work. And so I have applied that in my life ever since then on a general level, and almost always with success when I applied it. And then, Laura, there's the part about, well, Michael, what about all the times you didn't apply it? Well, I stepped in manure. I got in all kinds of trouble. So it's a good lesson. So children and jobs come and go. I became very expensive for my employer. I was a sales guy. I was actually not a good sales guy. I was a great sales guy. Still am. Still am. So got a hell of an ego, as you can tell. I mean, it's, but anyway. And so one day came and they're like, here's your compensation package. I'm like, that's not my package. I don't know whose it is. So parting of the ways, it came home. The wife's like, hey, where's your truck? I'm like, that was never our truck. I hope you remember that. And I've got a choice. I've helped other people build businesses my whole life, or I could finish building the gun shop business, which is what I already had. I could finish building that or work on that myself. So that allows me doing this, controlled chaos arms, building custom weapons, being your own boss. Well, I've got all kinds of freedoms now. I can go watch all my kids' volleyball games. I can take my son to go stare at the tracks and watch the trains come down. You name it. We can go do all those things. And we live in a hobby farm that we bought. And so you can go fish, ride 4-wheelers, do all these other things. I just don't have any complaints about most of these things. So we all have some, but that's kind of the basis of what shaped my life. But I can't put enough emphasis on the Creator himself, because that should be understood. But I really had parents that worked very hard to instill in us the most important things, because the fact of the matter is they were very poor. And we always did just fine, even though we didn't have a lot of stuff. I look at the stuff that I have around me now and think to myself, I should probably simplify if I was smart, or I should simplify more because I've got a lot of tangible stuff around me that's probably unnecessary. So I'm questioning some of that stuff at this point in my life. But my parents did well by us. They really did.
Is that what you envisioned for your life? Or did it ever take a turn besides the adoption, obviously? Just personally for you that you didn't see coming?
To be completely frank, I am not one of these people and have never been. And maybe I should be. Maybe I should be more of a planner. I don't know. I've never been one of these people that had a vision for where I was going to be or how I was going to end up.
Why is that?
Well, I took care of most of the things that were in the moment. Unfortunately, when I say that, and because I mean it, unfortunately, I was bright enough that I didn't have to try in school. I got good grades and I didn't have to put forth much effort. Dad and mom showed us a serious work ethic, so it wasn't hard to get and keep a job, especially one that paid relatively well, even as a kid in high school and as a young man. So those kinds of struggles didn't seem like they applied to me very much. And maybe they did, and I just didn't give it its just deserve. I'm not sure.
What did you struggle with?
Oh, well, so when a good friend, he's still one of my very best friends today. He doesn't live that far away, just a mile and a half, if you can believe it. He and I both came up to go to college at the same time, and we lived in the same basement of a home that was this gentleman was renting into, a nice guy. He found out that he couldn't essentially sublease to us. And oh, by the way, they wanted us that taken care of that day. So, and oh, by the way, get out. So I didn't have much. My roommate didn't have much. And between the two of us, we only used one car at any given moment. My car was down in Southwest Iowa, and his was up here in Des Moines. So we got in it and we went and stayed in the truck stop for a while. And so we slept there and would shower in the truck stop and then go to school and start over. And that sounds like it's a bad thing for some people. My mom and dad were like, they'll be fine. My buddy's mom and dad, I think that they were more apprehensive. My dad tells stories about having to basically tackle one of them from going and getting in the minivan and driving to Des Moines to find us. But this is a long time ago. I mean, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 50 now. So this wasn't cell phones. There wasn't any way to get a hold of anybody. I had a calling card with a few minutes of time on it. So I would call and check in. But my parents had to assume that everything was okay because you just couldn't send them shoot them a quick text or a selfie or something. As now things went down. So,
yeah.
And we did fine. We eventually found a place to live. So that was a little hard. I can remember not having a lot. I can remember my buddy Mitch that I'm talking about. We would, on the 28th of the month, the local McDonald's would sell 28-cent cheeseburgers.
Really?
Yes.
I remember that.
That was the only day that they would sell stuff cheap. They would sell a 28-cent cheeseburger. And when you went through the drive-thru, they would sell you 10 max. So, and they would tell you to get out. So he and I would drive around the McDonald's over and over, buying all the cheeseburgers that they would sell us. And then we'd stick them in the freezer and then we'd thaw out a couple.
Oh, wow.
And then, and then you'd eat them. And then big days were when my folks would stop through or something like that and drop off a care package. And we would have, like a can of corn. So you'd sit there with a can of corn and a spoon and a burger, and you'd make do, and you would eat for the whole week for $7 or something.
But none of those stories like bother you. I can tell by you retelling them that even in the moment, it doesn't seem like you ever were like, man, what am I going to do? Like, I think you even back then had the confidence of like, I'll figure it out. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. We did. Yeah. Well, here's the deal. There are worse things to have than a can of corn or a can of greens, sprinkling some salt inside the can because you didn't have much in the way of dishes, that kind of stuff. There's worse things than that, and some burgers that were microwaved while you're still sleeping and with the roof over your head than other people who are rummaging around in a garbage can. So was it fun? Maybe yes, maybe no. I didn't really think about it being tough at the time. I can remember some embarrassment and shame associated with not so much that. You'd have a buddy show up and you'd be sitting there on the couch eating a can of corn, generic, of course. They're looking at you and you're like, hey, dude, it's just fine. Get over yourself.
Yeah, but I think, at least from my experience, all kids that age are kind of going through that same thing anyway. So there isn't much shame around it. It's just the
Yeah.
way it is. Yeah.
I can remember people walking down the hallway to use the restroom, and they would look in my open door to my bedroom. And some of them, it is when you're talking about young men and women, that nothing shocks them very much. You know what I mean? But I couldn't afford a bed. So for about the first 4 or 5 years, I just slept on the floor, and then I used a blanket, whatever else. So it wasn't that big a deal. And admittedly, I don't mean to make it sound like it was that bad. I mean, when I got to the point where I probably could have afforded a bed, it wasn't what I wanted to spend my money on. And I could get up in the morning and I was all
Okay. I just
like
want to
that.
say something, because I grew up in the Midwest also.
Yeah.
And I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, only from the perspective of, like, I have had and gone through situations similar to that. And it's just like, it's not a woe is me scenario. It is a make the best with what you have scenario. And what is the thing I always say? You do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. That's kind of the way I've always lived.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's just part of being resourceful. I don't know if that's a Midwest thing or not, but I'm feeling those same kind of vibes from you, and I definitely relate to that. But the reason that I was, like, trying to get a little bit more into the layers of what you struggled with is because you are the only person that I have ever interviewed who has sent me a reading list. You sent me a list of books that you have read, or maybe the books you've actually enjoyed or got something out of, maybe your top books, which was a huge list, many of which I have never even heard of. The Bible was at the top. That was great. But an eclectic group of topics. And it's surprising on one hand and not surprising on the other, because when I think about what you're involved in, at least over the last decade or so, you are involved. I mean, think about this, especially in the landscape that we live in societally right now. You're involved in politics, religion, and guns, like all combined into one big swarm, right? I mean, what is that like, considering the landscape that we live in now culturally? How do you navigate that? Do you find that that's hard to navigate sometimes for you, or not at all?
There's I don't know if it's safe to say a duality, but there's certainly a dichotomy with that, because I don't find it hard myself, because I've thought through a lot of this. I've had a lot of these conversations. You know how this is. I mean, your Defenders Live has a lot of episodes. So you've done this enough time that you would be considered a sage, right? And you probably don't get pushed too far out of your comfort zone too often. But so because the playing field, the battleground, however it is you choose to refer to it, there's comfort associated with that. And you're armed with a little bit of knowledge, maybe even some wisdom. Now, that said, yeah, they're not the same things, and you know it.
No, they're not.
So with that, I have a desire to learn, to grow, to listen. I'm quite willing to listen to somebody who's babbling and incoherent, even a progressive liberal, and I'll probably find myself saying, I don't agree with any of that. But if they're honest and they're willing to listen, those can be tremendous conversations. What I have problems with is when immediately people put the brakes on about that stuff, and they say that they can't, or those things should never be discussed. If I walk into the local watering hole and they say, well, there's two things that aren't going to be discussed here, politics and religion, I think to myself, well, you're probably weak in the brain. That's why you can't or don't want to do this, because there's no reason that you can't talk about both of those things, maybe even mixed, and not do well. Why not? But I think maybe some people can't because their emotions can't be handled. Maybe some people don't want to talk about it because their proclivities don't lie into that subject matter and they're outside their comfort zone. I don't know, but I don't have any trouble with it now. But there was a time when I struggled to kind of keep up, because if you're going to advocate for the use of a weapon to stop a threat, the kind of things that you discuss all the time, Laura, if you're going to do that and you're going to proclaim yourself to endeavor to walk in Christ-like ways, to try to be salt and light, there are going to be a lot of people who say, I can't balance that equation. So you're a phony, or you're going to have to unpack that for me. And if you're going to talk like this and you're going to behave like this, you're going to have to be willing to unpack that. And so that requires preparation on your part and mine. And so can I handle those things? Are they problems for me? No, they're usually bigger problems for other people. And it does put a prerequisite on you and I to be able to back up with examples, almost in apologetic fashion, what we're talking about. And I think that's probably the best way to approach it. It has been for me.
I think that's rare. I really do. I think it's rare to find people who have the conviction, the courage, and even a bit of knowledge and or wisdom to speak on those matters. And I just wonder, like, how we got here, because I don't really understand personally how the political sphere and religion, how did all of that become such a touchy thing? It hasn't always been that way, has it?
No, I don't think so.
It's never been as sharp as it is right now, and divisive and emotionally generating for people. It just seems like it feels like the world's gone crazy, like the world's going mad, and the loudest voices seem to be the ones that are the most lost in so many ways, and it's hard to watch.
Well, that's all true. I've got a friend who's struggling with things like AI. We had this discussion just as recently as I think Monday night, and so just a few days ago. So the short version is, her position is AI is sent straight from the devil, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but that's just not true. And she's like, why do you think that? And I said, technology was not invented by a fallen angel. I said, technology was invented by human beings. And I said, and she said, well, what about things like the wheel? I said, I often wondered about that. I'm like, if God's so smart, why don't cheetahs have wheels instead of paws? And then I found out through searching, and there's the bacterial flagellum is ultra tiny. You need a microscope to see it, but it is a wheel, and it runs on an axle, and it has bearings, and it's capable of 10,000 RPMs, and then can stop and reverse in under a second. So God did make a wheel. It's just not something that you and I see. So we think that we're pretty smart. We invented wheel. We invented fire. I'm like, no, we didn't do any of that. That's silly. So back to the technology comment, I'm like, listen, we have a propensity to take things that are right in front of us and do some good with it. But there's a juxtaposition with that. We can also do tremendous harm with that. And when we get into technology, we come into a greater and greater degree of force multiplication. So can AI allow us to do some fantastic things very quickly and efficiently? Yes, without a doubt. I can summarize some of the works that we may discuss in that reading list, right? I can summarize those things in effective ways quickly by copying and pasting and asking for this Grok or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever to do that. And oh, by the way, it can organize videos and those kinds of things. So there are perils with that. Could I sit down and create a virtual world and spend my time in it? Yeah. What are the perils with that? Some people are big advocates. I'm like, well, if you build a virtual world where you're basically living out Grand Theft Auto at any given moment, and you're being awarded for killing hookers and cops, and you do that without cost to you at all, because if you lose the game, so to speak, you restart it or whatever else. I don't know, I've never played it, but the short version is, how doesn't that affect you? Isn't there a change in you by being desensitized to random wanton killing where you're encouraged to do more of it? I think that's a problem. So her point is AI can be horrific, and she's right about that, but she's not right that the devil does it. The devil is something that we play out. These are our choices, and we're making bad ones as often as we're making good ones, probably a little bit more often bad. Those are our proclivities. Adam should have curb stomped the snake, and we wouldn't be talking about this. But he didn't. He hung over in the corner as his wife spoke to what became the serpent, and didn't do anything about it. And people get ally with me about that. Oh, it was Eve's first sin. I'm like, no, dude, it was not. The command came to Adam before Eve had even been formed. He was given the responsibility to take care of all this thing. And oh, by the way, you see that one right over there? That tree? Don't touch it. Don't have anything to do with it. And he forgot the errand. And here we are. So, and all the covenants in between are broken with one exception. And so,
yeah, when I read the Bible, that's what I learn over and over and over again, is that we just keep getting it wrong. If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs.
Yeah.
I mean, it just reinforces our need for him every waking moment. And it's easy sometimes for me even to read some of those stories and be like, oh, well, I wouldn't do that. Oh, yeah? And then I get reminded how I might be in some form doing that right now. And it's very humbling. And yeah.
I remember, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm still pretty green on my journey. I still have a lot to learn. And seeing that reading list of yours, I'm just like, I should post it on here. It's insane. It's insane, the books that you have on the reading list. And it makes me feel very uneducated.
Well, believe me, I mean, I've made jokes about this before. My wife's like, do you realize if you had paid credits to move through that reading list at a college level, you'd have a minimum of one doctorate or maybe two. And I'm like, well, I haven't got through the whole list yet. There's like 10 or maybe 13 out of that list that I'm not done with. And there's a handful, there maybe 2 or 5 or something that are in various states of completion. So I'm not as good about that as I should be. I should read one from start to finish. And sometimes I'm like, this thing's becoming tedious. Let me pick up something else. So there are a couple
that has just captivated you that you just like couldn't put down and you've read more than one time. There's just something about it that you just can't let go of.
Well, the Bible would qualify across the board. I mean, you're not going to find a richer group of stories and instruction and warnings and beauty and sorrow all in one place. I mean, we speak richer language than we have any idea about. And most of it, especially in a culture like this, where it's a Judeo-Christian culture, we literally speak out of the scripture without even knowing it. I mean, you talk about haves and the have-nots and the sheep and the wolves, all these things that are common, especially that you're going to hear in Defender's Life from all kinds of guests that you have, Laura. These things are ripped right out of scripture. So that's by far and above the best. One of them I've read a few times that I keep coming back to, and I think he recently passed away. Alasdair MacIntyre, and I think he lived and died in Glasgow. I think the book is called After Virtue, if I remember right. And he basically starts out by saying, imagine a know-nothing culture decides that, and I'm paraphrasing here, mind you, imagine a know-nothing culture decides that science is the root of all their problems. And so they endeavor to be rid of it. They kill the scientists. They take the periodic table of elements down off of science rooms and they burn them. They destroy all the research and the literature and the history and the science books. They get rid of all of it and they're done with it. And they move forward thinking that the problems with our world are now in ashes. We can move forward. And after a while, they figure out, let's say it's a period of years, it doesn't matter. After a while, they figure out, well, that doesn't happen to be true. We kind of need some science. And so they resurrect it from the grave, but they don't have all of the periodic table. They got like 34. But so they try and piece it back together, and they've got this really haphazard, for lack of a better way of saying it, this half-ass view of science, and they put it forward and they do the best they can, right? Well, you can imagine how that's going to go. And the foreword of this book and this preemption, if you will, is laid out like that, and then he hits you with it. Alasdair is claiming that's what's happened with us on the subject of ethics,
Mm.
that we have abandoned ethics and what they were, how they're formed, what formed them, and how we should play those rules or those pillars in our culture out. And we're dealing with a haphazard group of fragmented ideologies which inform our or moralities, our principles, if you will, or how we practice them, and that we're all in a really lowly state as a result. And that hooked me, and I read the whole book. It was very hard to read. I didn't enjoy a lot of it, but I will tell you that was one that has made me think continually. And I go back to it, and I harken back to it a lot because I happen to believe that he's accurate. I really do, especially when I see some of these other works. I mean, there are a lot of authors that I like that crib heavily from New and Old Testament. I mean, what is it Milton says in Paradise Lost? Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light. Well, that's ripped right out of scripture, but he's right about that. And we're wise to remember things like that and realize we're not worthy of the grace that we're offered.
Mhm.
And we owe something for that we can't repay.
Yeah.
And you talked about these guys in the Bible that get it wrong over and over. I have a tremendous respect for the Jews in the Old Testament. And I've had some trouble with them too, because when they screwed around, they managed to make the law of God, right? So that was their primary problem. But they're given these covenants. And the covenant's always, and it's not a contract, covenant's a big deal, right? And they're like, if God says, when you do this, I will this and that. And God makes good, and they screw up. But then what I have respect for is not their screw up, but that they always come back and say, we're sure sorry. We're not worthy of your forgiveness or worthy of your forgiveness. And they do that. And I respect that, because you move forward into today's culture, even if somebody did say that they were sorry, they would expect forgiveness. Jews didn't seem to do that. And then you move forward to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah's like, okay, then God says, here's the new covenant. Well, that's a point forward to Christ. And then what's interesting about this covenant is Jesus comes to pay it. So it does get paid by a fully God, fully human being in one sense, because we couldn't make good on our covenant again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's a good lesson for you and I. It's a good lesson for anybody listening, that we can't repay this thing. We can't actually do what we're commanded to do. Love me and love one another. Easy. Let's go do that. Well, Michael, how's that working for you? Well, I do okay some days, and most of the time I don't do like I should, or maybe like I could. And so it's an impossible task that we endeavor to complete, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. Anybody that's honest knows that's the truth. I think it's funny though, some people that like think they're fooling people. I don't know. I think I have this God-given ability to sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'm able to see through people. I'm able to see through their words to what's really going on. And I just find it fascinating sometimes, and sometimes sad, to see people living in a way, acting in a way, talking in a way towards me that they think I don't really see who they are. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I just wish you'd just be honest. I just wish you would. And then if I were to call out what I actually see in love, there would probably be a whole lot of backlash for that, or denial, or whatever, justification, you name it. Again, just reinforcing that is the way that humans are, you know? And
well, I don't know how you avoid that. I will say, Laura, I think by approaching things very honestly, very forthright, I think that the more you do that, the easier that gets. But the caveat there is, at least for me, and it probably is this way for most folks, that there's a risk associated with that.
Oh, yeah.
And you can end up hurt, or your feelings bruised, or worse. So when you let your guard down in order to be very honest and forthcoming, there'll be people that don't like that or push back on you in ways that really cut to your core. And so when you open yourself up to honesty, you're going to open yourself up to ridicule, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's part of me that's like a little bit unhappy is not the word, but I think that if I had like 10 million followers or something, the hate would just pour in. I wonder if God is preparing me slowly, growing the channel slowly on purpose so that when that happens, I'm as prepared as I can be and I don't know that one can be. I'm sure you guys get all kinds of comments on your channel, do you not? On Iowa
Yeah,
Firearms Coalition.
usually, okay, so they fall into three categories, and the majority of them are very supportive. There's a few of them that are mocking and provoking, and then there's a few people that are out that actually are farther to the conservative extreme, if you want to call it that, than the folks at IFC, and they're angry because how come you're not issuing F-16s to every member, that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, in point of fact, we probably would if we had the budget for it. I would, as a board member, would vote for that, but we're not there yet. Calm down. So there is some of that, but overwhelmingly, it's not too bad. I think that in the position that you're in, as hard as this may sound, you may, in just the interests of time, because we're only given so much, just in the interests of time alone, I think you might be able to justify simply not leaving or not paying attention to comments. Because if you're going to deal with, I know that there's some people there that need to hear from you. I have no doubt about that. And this is why this one's a struggle for me. But the other part of me says, don't give them the notion that you're going to respond to comments and do those kinds of things, because you'll be taking so much negative on that it will stain or imbrue or taint you otherwise. And it's okay to move beyond the muck. So I don't know. There's part of me that says that as you grow naturally, the nasty will grow too. And you either have to have, let me back up. I think that you'd need to take stock to see if that's something that you wanted to enter into. Otherwise, I think that you can justify saying, I don't read the comments and I don't bother with it. That's a tough one, because you want to serve people, and you want to, because that's what we're called to be, as servants. So you want to serve these people that have come and spent time, but I'm not sure how much cost to yourself you should be willing to measure. A smart guy once told me, he's like, you got to have a stop loss. And I said, I don't know what that means. He was a really smart guy, way smarter than I was at the time. And he's like, you got to ask yourself in any investment how much you're willing to lose, because you don't want to be in free fall and then freak out and try to figure out whether you want to ride it all the way to the bottom or maybe it'll come back up. He's like, smart people have a determined amount of percentage that they're willing to give up before they pull the plug. And so I've kind of been hovering around a 10% guy from that point moving forward. When I'm sitting here fat, dumb, and sassy, and I'm like, hey, 8 points is all I'm willing to lose on this investment, because I can afford to say that right now. I'm not in the throes of an emotional disaster. I'm not watching the market crash. I can make this decision and make it well right now. And that way, when there is a problem, I'll be like, well, 8 points is where I'm at, and you're done, and you move on. I wonder if this is the same thing. You got to say, this is the amount of energy I'm willing to give that aspect of what I do. And this is the amount of hate and discontent and all the things associated, the calamity, the chaos I'm asking into my life. This is the size of bucket I'm willing to fill with it, and no more beyond that. I don't know if that's possible, but I wonder if those kinds of terms might be better for people like you and me.
I have those terms in my real life, in face-to-face life, so why wouldn't I have them on social media? Makes sense.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you're married. I don't have a significant other, but the fact of the matter is it would be normal to say, okay, this is the amount of nonsense I'm willing to put up with in this relationship, especially when you're dating us, before you say, this isn't for me. So I suppose on some level, we probably should be doing that.
Yeah, and I think thinking about it in advance is a wise thing to do. I don't know if things will explode, if they won't explode. Not up to me anyway. So I want to switch gears a little bit, because I just realized something. We've been talking this whole time, and I have not introduced the audience formally to Iowa Firearms Coalition. What does it stand for? What is the mission behind Iowa Firearms Coalition?
Well, okay, so Iowa Firearms Coalition is the second name that we've had. We started as Iowa Carry, and because at the time, I want to say it was 2004, something like that, this is a side story about me and how it brought me to the organization, but for 6 years in a row, I had gone to the county sheriff and asked for a permit to carry, because it was a May issue by individual sheriffs, and Iowa has 99 sheriffs. So you got 99 different policies, right? And so for 6 years in a row, I was basically told at the counter, hit the bricks, he doesn't issue to people. So the people from the county over all had permits. I was never going to get one because of where I lived. And maybe my voter registration, I happen to think that was part of it, but it didn't make a difference because there were, in a county of 38,000 people, there were roughly 200 permits. And oddly, they were all held by one political party. But I think with like one or two exceptions. So that was a problem. I didn't know that then, but I learned it later. Anyway, on the 6th year, I was inappropriate. I'm not gonna mince words about that. I lost my cool. And so I'm like, this is ridiculous. I said, and at the time I was like, do you have any idea what I do for a living? I build belt-fed machine guns. I build 20 millimeter shoulder fired cannons, and I drive them and deliver them across the country. And I have to ask for permission to get a permit to carry from some tin horn sheriff. This is ridiculous. I've got DEA and FBI and ATF and all these other acronyms in my shop routinely. This is dumb. And so I got a hold of my state senator and I read him the riot act. So then he called the sheriff and I wish it was his buddy. And the sheriff said what they sheriff say. I don't have a denial for Michael Ware. I think you've been lied to. And so he gets on, the senator gets on the phone in a subcommittee and calls me on the speakerphone and tears me up. And I'm like, I've gone in there for 6 years in a row. But because I wasn't even allowed to fill out the application, so I got stopped as a counter denial by the office staff, which were trained to do that. They didn't even have any paper showing that I had. So it made me look dumber than usual. I mean, I don't need that kind of help, Laura. I can do that all by myself. I don't need that. Anyway, so I reached out to a group that I had seen on the internet, Iowa Carry, and I said, hey, this is my experience. We got to change this. And in the meantime, the sheriff had called me personally. He's like, hey, why don't you stop by here? I think we can work something out. Because he knew that I was tuned up and I was really angry about it. So I come in and he's like, well, do you carry large sums of cash? I said, well, sure. Who doesn't? And he's like, well, you put that on as a justification for your permit. And I think that you might be able to get one. I said, well, I'm not doing that. And he said, why not? And I said, I'm filling this application out and I'm not talking about cash and I'm not writing anything down for my justification rather than being a freeborn American. And I said, who doesn't break laws? I said, if that isn't good enough for you, then don't issue it. I don't care. But I said, if as a career sales guy with the gift of gab, I can't come in here and make sense of this. I said, my friends and neighbors are never going to do this. So this process needs to be changed. You issue me that permit if you want or you don't. I don't care. And I got up and walked out. And so then I started volunteering with IFC. My permit showed up in the mail or showed up and they said, hey, come get it. And I got it. And at that point, I was torqued off. I was just angry. I'm like, this is wrong. We got to change this. So started volunteering. We eventually did. I think 5 or maybe 6 years later, we changed it from may issue to shall issue. Inexpensive permits, good for 5 years, all these other things. And so we went to the membership. The leadership did. I was kind of a middle management puke, if you will. They went to the membership and said, listen, we've accomplished our goal, our one and only goal. Do you want us to go home and leave Capitol Hill, or do you want us to work on other things? What's the preference of the membership? And the membership said, keep fighting. We've only got about 700 things we'd like to accomplish. So we rebadged into Iowa Firearms Coalition. Over that time, we sought alliances with NRA. So where the IFC is the official state association for the NRA. We work closely with NSSF. We've worked with GOA, Second Amendment Foundation. I don't think that we've worked directly with FBC, but I mean, we know them and they know us, I think. And so we've had a lot of collaborations. We've worked with the Safari Club, especially the Iowa chapter. So we're collaborating with a lot of people, and we try to work with the Sheriff's Association and the Department of Public Safety and the DNR when we can. We don't always see eye to eye, but we can usually make it through things. And sometimes one or more of us leaves mad. It's just the way it is. But it's a tremendous organization. It's all volunteer. These people work very hard at very late nights, and they're very organized. And I'm super, super proud of the people I work with because I've grown to know them so much. And I know how hard they work and how they collaborate. And the fact that, I don't know, they don't get paid. They operate on passion, and they don't do it for themselves. I mean, I had a permit when I went to go volunteer with IFC. So most people are like, well, what are you here for? I'm like, because we need to change it. So, well, you got a permit. What do you care? I'm like, this is wrong. We have to absolutely change this, because none of my friends and family are going to get this permit with a high likelihood. It's just not going to happen. This process has to be changed. So that was my personal experience, but the people at IFC, man, they work hard for other people, and those are admirable qualities. I mean, I was walking through this with my daughter the other day, and we were reading 1 Timothy 2, and then we got through that. We went to 1 Timothy 3, and it's the qualifications for like overseers, your pastors, deacons, elders, that kind of stuff. And we walked down through it, and I asked her, I said, is there anything that stands out to you about this list? She's like, no. And I said, well, okay, I'm asking you a question. It's a little tough to answer, but I said, if you'll notice, I said, it doesn't say anywhere in there that you need to be a skilled orator or good with a checkbook or whatever else to lead a church or whatever else. I said, do you understand? These are all character traits. The prerequisites to lead a church are to be male, or at least to oversee them and to teach over them, and to have high character. That's what they're asking for. Those are the prerequisites. So I said, it isn't whether you're really good at running your yap or whether you can handle money and all the other things that you think you need to run a church. They're issues of character. And so we're going to have to work on that. It's my job to build you up, my daughter, so that you have character and you have character traits. And oh, by the way, not only can you share those with others while you're salt and light, but you seek those. If you bring home a knuckle dragger to introduce me and expect for me that to go well, as if this person's worthy of being married to you, I don't think that's gonna wash out. So, and she knows that, but because dads are dads and daughters are daughters. But I think you probably have an idea what I'm talking about. But that's what this thing is, and I'm really glad about how IFC's volunteers approach this, because they work very hard. They go to gun shows and they stand there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting flat feet on the concrete, watching thousands of people walk by, trying to convince them to help us based on merit. And unfortunately, it nearly as much success as they had ought to, but they keep coming back and doing it. And I admire that. That's inspirational, and I love them to death.
Yeah. Wow. I think you're pretty inspirational too. I think we could go another hour. I don't have another hour, but I wish we did.
That's all right.
Because we didn't even get to half of my questions, but I did want to make sure, this is always hard for me in interviews, because when I'm really enjoying interviewing someone, or I don't even think of it as an interview, a conversation with somebody, I often like to not have a plan. I make a plan and then I see what happens. And sometimes it's way more fun and way more interesting for me to go off script and just see where the Lord leads me, because I've been too structured at times during my podcasting career. And it just felt, yeah. So,
well, organic interviews can be scary because you never know what's going to crop up that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
But I think from what I have seen of what I've watched, you have a pretty good idea who you're asking on and what benefits it may bring to the listeners. So I think that you're relatively safe in your choices, that at least the ones that I have watched so far. And you've had some fantastic people on. I'd like to bug you for some of those folks. But if you want to talk about more stuff later, I mean, I'll come on another time, another 10 times, whatever it is that, I mean, if we're not boring the heck out of people.
No, great. I don't think we are. I mean, usually if I'm not bored, the audience isn't bored either. But I do want to make sure that I put up this banner. If I could get the darn screen to, I'm going to have to move it over here. I mean, it is the technology, I tell you what. Yeah, I'll just put that ticker on the bottom. And just make sure, guys, that you go check out Iowa Firearms Coalition. And then could you speak to the other two links there?
Okay, so Controlled Chaos Arms is the business that I own and operate. Well, we build precision rifles, precision 1911s, handguns, all these kinds of things. We do a lot of refurbished work. I mean, there'll be people that come in with something old. This is the gun that I learned to use with my granddaddy. He's long gone now. And it's in lousy shape. Can you make it like new? Well, no, but I can get darn close. So some of that's all. I take a great deal of pleasure handing something back, something that they've had memories with and that they're tied to, so they can do the same things with their grandkids. And so those projects are admittedly a lot of fun. I like doing that too. There's basic repair whenever so we handle. So we're kind of transitioning into what I would always want to be, which is a boutique shop where you say it's the things you want to say yes to and no to the things that you don't. So it's coming together after almost 20 years. And as far as cbfnewton.org, it's a non-denominational church and not tied to any other. It's a relatively large building with a relatively small congregation, and it's absolutely chock full of sinners. And I mean, it's not where the cool kids hang out. It's a hospital for sinners. But I think that when people understand that, like, oh, Michael, you talk about these things, they sound so great. I'm like, well, they're not. God's great. I was just there, you standing there when the bus stopped. I mean, so good for you, good for me. It's all working out. So I don't know. I really enjoy the men's ministry that I'm part of and the mission field. And maybe there'll be time to talk about some of those things in the future where I can share with you my revelation of faith, so to speak. I mean, some of these things are interesting stories. And for me, it was obviously very convicting. So it's a book, chapter, verse church. I mean, the pastor decides what book of the Bible he's going to preach in, and he starts at the beginning. And you can plan on having that. Yeah, maybe not Easter and Christmas, but you can plan on having that until it's done. Like, for example, it took us, I think, 2.5 years to get through the book of Luke. So it's truly expositional. There, the context is offered. It's comparing scripture against scripture to learn the Bible, to become biblically literate and soak up what it is. I'm addicted to it. I love it. Theme preaching is harder for me now that I've had such a steady diet of this. So it's a nice little congregation. There are people there who work very hard for Christ, and I'm tickled to be part of them. They're really great, usually.
I was just thinking, if we have a part 2 Michael Ware episode, I would love to hear from you guys, from the audience. Like, what about this interview spoke to you? And what would you like Michael and I to speak on in more depth? Because there are so many directions. I kind of always think of as, if when I have people on multiple times, the first interview is just like this general highlight, top level kind of thing. And going really deep and narrow into a focused topic is generally not what happens on the first one. So the wheels are already turning for me, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think and what you'd like to hear about. And Michael, whatever you have in mind too, I'm open to. So this has been a fun interview.
Well, I could throw you some suggestions, because the truth of the matter is, when you do an interview like this, again, thank you very much for coming on IFC's Warrior Wednesday podcast, because John was the one who prompted me, John McLaughlin. I have a friend in common. And he said, Laura will be a great guest. And I said, yeah, why? That's the first thing I said. And he said, what she gets done with her faith and her dedication to training and some of these things in her journey, people would really be interested in. And you and I got to talk about that on Warrior Wednesday, and none of which we brought up. I'm sure that many people that are following you and listen to this know some of those things. But as you mentioned at the beginning of this, we left the door wide open, and you ran through it with something that was very personal for you. And I enjoyed the heck out of that. And thank you for your willingness to share that. So there were some things that we touched on in that interview that didn't get brought here. And maybe we should be doing some of that too. So there's always room for follow-up conversation.
I'm trying to make this not about me though. It's about you. But
it's about us. It's about us. It's about us. Don't think for a minute it's singular.
Yeah, that's true. I'm getting better at having the spotlight on me. Again, like being an interviewer versus being interviewed on a show or podcast or whatever is a totally different experience, right? And maybe it's not that much different for you. I know that you like to talk, it seems, and are good at it. I have a tendency to kind of hang back and not be at the forefront. I like to hear what other people have to say, and I like to observe other people and don't speak out quite as much, but I'm getting better at it. And your podcast was one of the most comfortable interviews that I've had in a long time. So
great. I'm glad.
It was good practice for me. Thank you.
No, anytime.
All right. Well, yet to be determined if Michael Ware will be back on a second time. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to hear about. And Michael, you've been an absolute pleasure. Just a person with a huge heart, a heart of service to others. It shows. And I love that you had me correct the beginning of the show with you're striving to live what you preach or teach, that you aren't perfect. And you're a very humble man. And I appreciate your honesty.
Not humble enough, but it's like anything, Laura. You've pointed out several times, this is a work in progress. And because we're forgiven for all these mistakes and we can endeavor to do better, that's fantastic. We should embrace it and give every effort. I have to work. I mean, I know that we make jokes about it, and we have, but I have to work to keep my ego in check. So it's,
Me too.
I have to be careful. And so it's good when we can do that. Thank you very much for having me on and join us. Thank you very much.